PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And what a fantastic show we have planned for you tonight. As here on Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be breaking down and looking back and kind of doing a retrospective on the 2017 NHL expansion draft. Essentially, what we are going to do is that since the Vegas Golden Knights are in year 7 of their franchise, we are going to be taking a look back at all the players that were selected during the expansion draft by your Vegas Golden Knights. And the way that we're going to be breaking this down is that we're going to go by team. So essentially what we are going to do on this show on PRConnectionsRadio.com is that we are going to start with the Anaheim Ducks and go all the way to the Winnipeg Jets. So from A to Z, we're going to kind of give you a little bit of a breakdown on the players that were selected by your Vegas Golden Knights on expansion draft night. And as you see on the screen right here, I wanted to put this up first. These were indeed all of the selections on that night when it came to your Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll talk about the 14 forwards, 13 defensemen, 3 goalies, and then the players they also acquired via trade, and even some of the notable draft picks that they got in this situation. So I will say that when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights 2017 NHL expansion draft, looking back at it 7 years later, let's get into it here on this show. And let's start out with the Anaheim Ducks. So the Anaheim Ducks is who we are going to be starting out with. And the first player that we are going to be talking about is Clayton Stoner. Now, Clayton Stoner was the player that was selected as a defenseman here out of the Vegas Golden Knights system. And I will say, when it comes to the Anaheim Ducks, Josh Manson, Sami Vatanen, there was some good options in defense when it came to your Anaheim Ducks and the Vegas Golden Knights selection process. But the reason why Clayton Stoner was taken by the Vegas Golden Knights was because of who was added to the selection. Now, before we get into Shea, I just want to very quickly mention Clayton Stoner because he's actually a fascinating case when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights. So Clayton Stoner never played a single game for the Vegas Golden Knights. He skated with the organization in preseason. As you see right here, he was wearing the number 4 jersey. In fact, a Stoner jersey was actually one of the most frequent jerseys you saw in the very beginning of the Vegas Golden Knights organization. But for Clayton Stoner, he would actually be ruled out indefinitely with an abdomen injury, okay? And he would end up being on the injured reserve, and he would never play a single NHL game after 2017. He would be retired and then join the Golden Knights organization in a junior development role. So that was about Clayton Stoner from the Anaheim Ducks. Now, when it came to Shea Theodore himself, what happened to Shea Theodore? Well, not only did he become a mainstay and one of the best players that the Vegas Golden Knights have had during this entire situation, but when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, it's really interesting to kind of look at and kind of examine because of who they got in this situation. So when it came to now, when it comes to that situation there, I will say that when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights and everything that happened there, you have Shea Theodore. Now, he was a prospect for the Anaheim Ducks at the time, but with Clayton Stoner being taken, they got Shea Theodore as a prospect in this expansion draft, and he has turned out to be arguably one of the best players in Vegas Golden Knights history. So, in a kind of a cause and effect, if you don't have Clayton Stoner being taken over a Josh Manson, over a Sami Vatanen, then you wouldn't be able to get a guy like Shea Theodore. You wouldn't be able to go out and get a guy who did what he did in Vegas. So, yeah, Anaheim Ducks, Clayton Stoner was taken. Shea Theodore ended up being a mainstay and a misfit to this day. Next would be the Arizona Coyotes, and this selection did not pan out much, as they would end up taking Timo Pukkanen. And Timo Pukkanen, he was a former draft pick by the Detroit Red Wings back in 2010. He would actually be part of the preseason roster by your Vegas Golden Knights. He would actually not play a single NHL game for your Vegas Golden Knights. He would play in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves in that one season before heading over to Russia, where he is still to this day. So for Timo Pukkanen, this story kind of ends here, as he was taken by the Vegas Golden Knights as part of the Arizona Coyotes, and he just did not pan out. He ended up not being what they needed in that situation. So he was one of those players that just did not end up happening with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, the Boston Bruins were the next team up when it came to the 2017 NHL expansion, and they selected defenseman Colin Miller. And Colin Miller is actually an interesting player when you actually stop and analyze it. Because when it came to Colin Miller, he was a guy who was a solid young defenseman, kind of up on the bottom pairing with the Boston Bruins. But he eventually would earn his spot with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. He'd play a couple of seasons here in Vegas, including the 2017-2018 season, where they made it to the Stanley Cup final. Now, unfortunately, due to salary cap and a lot of stuff that happened afterwards, Colin Miller would be dealt to the Buffalo Sabres. And after being around a couple of teams, kind of bouncing around back and forth, he has now found a mainstay in Dallas with Colin Miller. So for someone like Colin Miller, who is kind of a younger defenseman out there with the Boston Bruins, for him to be taken by the Vegas Golden Knights, really fascinating on that part. And like I said before, considering that he was with the Dallas Stars and the New Jersey Devils as well, he has become a mainstay in the NHL. He has played over 450 games at this point in his career. Now, since we move over from the Boston Bruins, we go to the Buffalo Sabres, and this is one of the most impactful guys they got from the NHL expansion draft, as your Vegas Golden Knights would end up getting a very well-established guy. They would get William Carrier, who is a very young forward, a former top pick in the second round by the St. Louis Blues, ended up his way to Buffalo, and then left exposed on expansion draft night. And William Carrier has become a constant. He has become a reliable guy for your Vegas Golden Knights. And what an amazing draft pick he has been, as William Carrier has not only gone on to be a Stanley Cup champion with your Vegas Golden Knights, but similar to Shea Theodore, who I talked about earlier in the show, William Carrier has turned out to be one of the best players the Vegas Golden Knights have had as a bottom six forward. And, you know, when it comes to William Carrier, there was a 6th-round pick that they also got in this draft. And with that 6th-round pick in 2017, they ended up getting some good value out of it, as Jari Patara would end up being the 6th-round pick they would get by selecting William Carrier. So not only did the Buffalo Sabres give up a good bottom six forward in William Carrier, but they'd end up giving up a 6th-round pick that Jari Patara would end up being selected with that selection. So for anybody who wants to know how the Vegas Golden Knights got Jari Patara, well, you got him thanks to the 2017 NHL expansion draft. So as we're continuing to talk about the 2017 NHL expansion draft and talking about certain players who have made an impact on this team, of course, we have to mention this guy because it would kind of be criminal not to, but the Calgary Flames, they took someone who loved by Las Vegas, someone who was a Vegas product, someone who the Vegas Golden Knights community wanted to have, and that was gritty defenseman and a veteran presence in Derek England. Now, Derek England, he had been around the Pittsburgh Penguins, he had been in the Calgary Flames, but he had been originally a defenseman for the Las Vegas Wranglers in the mid-2000s. So, fast forward to 2017, he is an established veteran in the NHL, and he'd be taken by your Vegas Golden Knights to be a veteran second defensive pairing in the Vegas Golden Knights system. Now, we all know that Derek England now has become a mainstay in Vegas. Not only did he become a fan favorite with the Golden Knights organization, but even after retiring at the end of the 2019-2020 season, he would end up becoming a special assistant to the owner, Bill Foley. So Bill Foley would bring Derek England on to be a special assistant. He would even help out with the Henderson Silver Knights of the AHL during 2021-2022. So a guy like Derek England was definitely a very successful pick for your Vegas Golden Knights, based on the fact that when it came to Derek England, he was already an established guy in Vegas, but more importantly, Derek England showed in his multiple seasons playing in Vegas that he was a constant, a durable defenseman, someone who the Vegas Golden Knights community ended up liking and ended up actually kind of picking up on along the way. So Derek England, a Vegas-born, someone who is loved by the Vegas Golden Knights community, he was taken from the Calgary Flames during this 2017 NHL expansion draft. Now, this next guy is going to be very quick because he never played for Vegas. So, Connor Brickley, who was a minor league player, an AHL player for the Carolina Hurricanes, was taken by Vegas, and they would also get a fifth-round pick in this NHL expansion draft. So, Carolina would end up giving up Connor Brickley and a fifth-round pick in 2017. Now, to keep this brief, Connor Brickley would never even play for the Vegas Golden Knights organization, as he would actually be a free agent, and he would leave the Golden Knights organization and sign with Florida instead of being in Vegas. Now, the fifth-round pick, Jack Dugan, he actually was a minor league player for a couple of years with the Golden Knights organization, but he eventually moved on and is now a minor league player with the New Jersey Devils in the AHL. So, Carolina Hurricanes is essentially done with Brickley and then their fifth-round pick, Jack Dugan. Chicago Blackhawks were next, and man, this guy was a huge deal on draft night. I remember being at the expansion draft live, and when they announced that Trevor Van Riemsdyk would be the selection from the Chicago Blackhawks, there was some expectations that he'd be a second defensive pairing. He'd be someone the Vegas Golden Knights could have as kind of a young, established defenseman who was already a Stanley Cup champion, as you see there, with the Chicago Blackhawks. So, what would be in store for TVR, you might ask? Well, he would get immediately flipped not even 2 days later after being selected to the Carolina Hurricanes. After a couple of years in Carolina, he would then go to Washington, where he is now as a constant member of the Washington Capitals. So a guy like Trevor Van Riemsdyk, he ended up not even being a member of your Vegas Golden Knights, but he is still a good member of the NHL roster still to this day. I appreciate your support. Thank you. Now, the Colorado Avalanche would be next, and their selection would be actually the first pick in the entire NHL expansion draft, as Calvin Pickard was the first selection by Vegas. Anybody who doesn't remember, Colorado was the first selection on the board. They took Calvin Pickard. Now, Calvin Pickard was a goalie on a very bad Colorado Avalanche team back in 2016-2017. My, oh my, how the tables have turned on that, by the way, that Calvin Pickard being on a bad Colorado Avalanche team. But Calvin Pickard, in a weird, ironic twist, would never play a game for the Vegas Golden Knights, as Calvin Pickard would be put on waivers towards the beginning of opening day in 2017. He would be picked up by the Toronto Maple Leafs after having a few cup of coffee in Toronto, in Detroit, and a few other places. He has ended up in Edmonton, where the last 2 seasons he has been either backup goalie or AHL starter with the Bakersfield Condors. So Calvin Pickard has still been a mainstay and is still active in the hockey world as of this day. But that was who was taken by the Colorado Avalanche in the 2017 NHL expansion draft. Now, next up is somebody that we have to talk about because this guy changed the entire franchise with Vegas. The Columbus Blue Jackets didn't want the Golden Knights to have this guy named Josh Anderson. And because they wanted to protect Josh Anderson so much, they gave up a bottom 6 forward at the time by the name of William Karlsson. Now, William Karlsson was kind of an unknown in the NHL, a young, mid-20s type of forward. Vegas took him, but they also took the contract of Wendell Clarkson. I know his name is David, but Wendell is technically his first name. David Clarkson. They also had a pick swap with a 2017 first-round pick, and we'll talk about where that went later, and a 2019 second-round pick, which eventually would be flipped to the Los Angeles Kings. So, the 2017 first-round pick would not be taken by Vegas. It'd be flipped down the line. 2019 second-round pick would be flipped to a division rival, and David Clarkson would never play a game in the NHL again, as him being on long-term IR. He was there for the cap hit for the Vegas Golden Knights. But the one person that mattered the most was William Karlsson. And after having an amazing debut season with the Vegas Golden Knights, not only has he become a fan favorite in Vegas, but he has been a top 5 in franchise leader in almost every statistical category you can come up with. Games played, goals, assists, points, time on ice, wins above replacement. William Karlsson was by far a great selection by Vegas. And I know Josh Anderson is doing his stuff in Montreal, but let's just be honest. The Columbus Blue Jackets absolutely lost in this situation as the Vegas Golden Knights got a steal in William Karlsson. Now, moving over to the Dallas Stars, and I'm not going to do what Bill Foley did on draft night and say that the Detroit Red Wings select Cody Eakin because it wasn't Detroit, it was Dallas where Cody Eakin came from. But Dallas Stars and Cody Eakin is an interesting story because Cody Eakin would be a middle 6 forward for the Vegas Golden Knights for a couple of years. He was a solid member of the middle 6/bottom 6 for the Vegas Golden Knights. But Cody Eakin eventually would actually become a cap casualty in Vegas. So at the 2020 NHL trade deadline, Cody Eakin would be dealt to the Winnipeg Jets. They'd actually end up freeing some cap space. After Cody Eakin would spend some time with another couple other teams, he would end up signing a professional tryout agreement in 2022-2023 with the Calgary Flames. He would not be picked up by them, but his last performance was a preseason action in Calgary in 2022. Now, currently, Cody Eakin is playing in the Switzerland Hockey League, the SHL, and really interesting to see what happens there. But with Cody Eakin, at this point in his career, his NHL tenure is done. Now, moving over to the Detroit Red Wings, they ended up getting Tomas Nosek. And Nosek actually became a really underrated pick by the Vegas Golden Knights because the Vegas Golden Knights would get a couple of seasons out of Tomas Nosek, and he would end up being a solid 4th-line center in Vegas. Consider him the prelude to Nick Waugh. How Nick Waugh has been a constant 4th-line center, Tomas Nosek was that 4th-line center for the first couple of years. And Tomas Nosek, after leaving the Vegas Golden Knights, he would join the Boston Bruins for a while and now is a New Jersey Devil as a bottom 6 forward in New Jersey. But overall, not a bad pick by Vegas. He did get a couple of seasons out of him, and that's what you care about in terms of production. This guy, I really can't say anything positive about. I really can't figure out what to say positively about this. So the Vegas Golden Knights took from the Edmonton Oilers a former top 10 pick in Griffin Reinhart. Now, Griffin Reinhart was an amazing prospect. He had some prestige. He was someone that had some talent, but it was raw talent. So the Vegas Golden Knights would have Griffin Reinhart ending up being on the main roster in 2017, 2018, but he overall would never play an official game for the Vegas Golden Knights. He'd be part of the preseason in 2017 and then would be sent down to the AHL. And Griffin Reinhart is an actually interesting story because after leaving the Golden Knights in 2018, 2019, after 2 seasons in the AHL, he would go over to the KHL and play in Russia before having small stints in the DEL, which is in Germany, and the EIHL, which is in the United Kingdom. So for Griffin Reinhart, unfortunately, just didn't pan out for Vegas, but that's okay. And next up is the Florida Panthers, and let's not waste any time here. Let's just call it what it is. This is by far one of the best moves the Vegas Golden Knights have ever had, as the Florida Panthers would end up getting Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, and a 4th-round pick in 2018. Now, that 2018 4th rounder, I'm going to point this out to you. It was never taken by Vegas. They would flip it later on for more draft picks. So that 2018 4th-round pick never was with the Golden Knights. But Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith have ended up becoming a dynamic duo for the Vegas Golden Knights. Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith, 2/3 of the misfit line that they would end up becoming, would play 6 full seasons for the Vegas Golden Knights, would set franchise records for every single category, and will no doubt be in the Ring of Honor when the Vegas Golden Knights eventually get there. Now, unfortunately, Riley Smith is no longer on the Golden Knights organization. They would flip him over to Pittsburgh as kind of a cap casualty in the offseason. But Jonathan Marchessault, still an active member of your Vegas Golden Knights. And speaking of someone who is still an active member of your Vegas Golden Knights, the LA Kings would give up defenseman Brayden McNabb. And Brayden McNabb was kind of an unknown as well. I mean, people knew who he was in the hockey world, but a lot of people that didn't know a lot about the LA Kings didn't know what to expect from Brayden McNabb. Well, what ended up happening is that Brayden McNabb would become the most durable defenseman the Golden Knights have ever seen. He has been with Vegas since day one. And not only is Nabber my favorite player on the Golden Knights, anyone who watches Vegas Hockey Hub will already tell you that, but with Brayden McNabb, he has become a guy where you put him with Shea, he will make it work. You put him with Nate Schmidt, he'll make it work. He'll put it with Kaden Korczak, he'll make it work. Brayden McNabb is a guy who you can count on with the Vegas Golden Knights. And considering that he has played all 7 years with the Golden Knights organization, it's safe to say that he did pan out as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, moving over to the Minnesota Wild, this is actually interesting to talk about. Because the Minnesota Wild, there was originally a defenseman by the name of Matt Dumba that could have been unprotected and Vegas could have taken. But because the Minnesota Wild wanted to protect Matt Dumba, the Vegas Golden Knights would end up getting Erik Haula and a prospect, a former first-round pick at the time, in Alex Tuch. Now, Erik Haula would play in Vegas for the first 2 years. He had a 30-goal season for the Golden Knights organization, did a stand-up job as a member of Vegas, but unfortunately, as I said earlier on the show, Erik Haula would once again become another cap casualty by the Golden Knights. And in the beginning of the 2019-2020 offseason, Erik Haula would be dealt to the Carolina Hurricanes. The Vegas Golden Knights would get Nick Waugh back in that deal, but Erik Haula would be traded to Carolina. And after bouncing around for a couple of teams, he is now a member of the Boston Bruins after having a cup of coffee in Carolina and in New Jersey. So Erik Haula, currently a middle six forward for the Boston Bruins. Next up is the Montreal Canadiens, and this one's going to be very short, as Alexei Emelin never played a single game for Vegas. The Golden Knights would flip him 2 days later to the Nashville Predators, and now he is playing in the KHL out there in Russia. And, as we are talking about everything that's going on with the 2017 NHL expansion draft, you have to kind of focus on what happened next with this guy, because there's a lot we can definitely be talking about. And who I'm talking about here is the Nashville Predators and James Neal. So James Neal was the biggest name outside of a certain goalie that the Vegas Golden Knights got during the expansion draft. James Neal was a well-known, a well-established name in hockey. Regardless if he was in Dallas, Pittsburgh, Nashville, he was well-established. Well, James Neal would become a top six forward in his one and only season playing in Vegas. Afterwards, James Neal would actually sign with the Calgary Flames. He'd move around a little bit, go to Edmonton, and then finally, he would sign a PTO with the Columbus Blue Jackets. After not being picked up on the NHL roster, he would play in the AHL to end his career before officially retiring in 2022-2023. So James Neal had a productive career, but it did not last as long as it should have with the Vegas Golden Knights. The next guy we have to talk about for the New Jersey Devils, defenseman John Merrill. Now, this is somebody who was a good defenseman for a couple of years with the Golden Knights. But John Merrill ended up going to Detroit after leaving the Golden Knights. And after having a small cup of coffee in Detroit, he would end up playing for the Minnesota Wild, where he is still in Minnesota today. All right? And you're 100% correct, by the way. James Neal said, never fall in love with the players, only fall in love with the team. 100% right. And kind of continuing this conversation here. Now, this one is not going to have any slides to it, so I'm just going to name it real quick. The New York Islanders would give up J.F. Berube, a goaltender who never played for Vegas, would sign with Chicago as a free agent. Jake Bischoff, who is still a defenseman for the Henderson Silver Knights and the captain of the Henderson Silver Knights to this day. Mikhail Gorbrowski, who never played for Vegas, was a long-term injury reserve and never played again in the NHL. And a 2017 first-round pick who ended up becoming Erik Brannstrom. Now, Erik Brannstrom was a top prospect for Vegas. He would end up being flipped to the Ottawa Senators, where he still plays to this day. And, as we're kind of mentioning the rest of the people that are here, there's a few notables I do want to mention very quickly. The New York Rangers getting Oscar Lindberg. He'd play in Vegas for 2 years before getting flipped alongside Erik Brannstrom in the Mark Stone deal. Ottawa Senators, Mark Mafat was a defenseman who never played for Vegas, as they would flip him a week after the expansion draft and would send him to Dallas. Philadelphia Flyers was Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and Bellemare has been a constant in the NHL and is still an active member to this day as a bottom six forward with the Seattle Kraken, an expansion team after Vegas. The Pittsburgh Penguins would be goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury, a fan favorite, someone who is loved still to this day by Vegas, and would be second all-time in wins by a goaltender. Funny enough, they would get a 2020 second-round pick, but this draft pick right here would be flipped at the 2019 NHL trade deadline as the Vegas Golden Knights went out and got Robin Lehner. So when Robin Lehner got flipped to Vegas, they used this second-round pick as one of the packages to get Robin Lehner. San Jose Sharks was David Schlemko. He never played for Vegas. He would actually be flipped to Montreal. And then lastly, you have two more left. You have the St. Louis Blues with David Perron, who is now with the Detroit Red Wings. David Perron, still an active member of the NHL. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning. You had Jason Garrison, defenseman, really didn't pan out. Nikita Gusev, who actually never played for Vegas, got flipped to New Jersey. A second-round pick that would be traded to Columbus for Keegan Kolesar. And a fourth-round pick that ended up becoming future NHLer Paul Cotter. So, when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, this was your 2017 NHL expansion draft 7 years later. And what a fantastic expansion draft. And that was your recap 7 years later. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey. And go Knights. Go.